Okay, so we're continuing to discuss the general principles of what creates speed in the water, and we are still focused on timing. Today, we're going to discuss limb to undulation timing, specifically in breaststroke and butterfly, because those are the strokes where we see undulation. And if you'll see, there's a general rhythm of the body, which kind of goes up and down, and that's tied into when the arms perform certain actions. And that's because the precise timing allows for the maximization of propulsion of the limbs and then also the minimization of resistance as the athlete swims through the water. And so those two things trade off of each other, and we want to find positions that create a lot of propulsion while minimizing resistance, and the undulation allows swimmers to do that. We'll take a look at what that looks like in the specific strokes. So we'll start with breaststroke here with the athlete on the right, and as he starts to take his pull here, you see he starts to rise up, and then everything kind of comes up with that, and then as he starts to come down, everything kind of follows along that path too. And so that's the full stroke cycle. And what we're going to look for is how that allows for the optimization of propulsion and then the minimization of resistance. And so as he takes his pull here, by rising up out of the water, it allows him to get more leverage on the water and kind of push backwards. It puts his arms, his forearms in a better position to move water backwards. And by arching the back, he can take advantage of the lats that kind of shortens them and allows them to be in a position to create more propulsion. And so he can use that to create propulsion. And by rising up with the upper body and not allowing quite yet the lower body to come up, it keeps everything in line. And that's really important for minimizing resistance. And then as he shoots forward back, by following the wave back down, he's able to get the body back into alignment and then able to kick from a position where there's not very much resistance, so he's able to be in a much better line. And then the momentum of that wave, it travels to the hips, and you can see right there, the hips kind of pop back up to the surface. We'll take a look at that again. So right there, the hips kind of come back up to the surface, and that's really important because that also establishes the great body alignment that you see right there. And so if the hips aren't following that wave and coming back up over the top, the swimmer is going to be kind of moving through the water at an angle, and that angle might get worse and worse and worse as swimmers get fatigued. So it's really important for that the end of the wave to follow them back over it so that they can get back into line with each stroke. And that wave over the top also allows for athletes to get a little bit better kick, because if the hips were moving down at that time, it's going to be a lot harder to get in position where they can leverage on the water with their feet and their ankles. And so that strategy allows them to get more out of the kick as well, because they're going to be in a position where the feet are a little bit lower than the hips, and that's going to allow them to get more leverage on the water as well. So the key points are that the pull is going to be more effective by coming up a little bit, starting that wave of undulation, and then it allows that swimmer to get more out of the pull by putting the arms in a more advantageous position and also putting the muscles of the back in a more advantageous position to create force. And then the swimmer can use the downside of that undulation to get out of that position of resistance, drive forward, and that's going to help them get the hips back up to the surface, as you just saw right there. And so that's why the undulation can be really valuable, because it allows swimmers to get more out of their pull. It puts them in a better position to get a little bit more out of their kick, and it allows them to get back into line after they take that breath, and they most definitely have to take that breath because they need oxygen. And so by using a little bit of a wave action and timing it correctly, swimmers can take the breath, actually take advantage of the breath by getting more out of the pull, and then getting back into a good alignment by driving back down on the downside of that undulation, getting the hips back up. So that's an example of how doing everything well and doing everything at the right time can allow swimmers to get more propulsion while minimizing the cost and minimizing the resistance that they create as they move through the water. So we'll take a look at it. Same thing with a different swimmer. You can see here, there's that leverage by driving the upper body up, allows a better squeeze of the pull, more propulsion. And then by diving back down, the hips are able to come up right there. You can see them pop right back up to the surface. So right there. And that allows this athlete to get in a much better line. And she's swimming at a very high tempo. You can see that there's zero pause, zero hesitation, but still, same basic concept as the last swimmer we saw who was swimming at a much lower tempo. By timing it right, by letting that wave travel through, the hips are going to pop back up to the surface. The swimmer's able to get a breath, and they're able to get a really strong pull by arching the back and really squeezing. If that concept doesn't make sense, try to really round your back over and then try to pull and then arch your back, and you can just feel the squeeze that you get from that. So you're combining the breath, but you're taking advantage of the breath to get more out of the pull, and then you're using that momentum, the wave that's been created, to dive forward Then you're using the momentum of that wave that's created to dive forward, and that's going to allow the hips to pop right back up to the surface, and that's going to create a much better line to move through the water with. Ultimately, not super complicated, but if done well or if not done well, it can have a major impact on performance, a major impact on speed, and a major impact on how tired swimmers get. Because if they're not getting the advantage of the pull from the breath, they're going to have to work a lot harder to create the same amount of propulsion. And if the hips aren't coming back up in the line every time, they're going to be creating a lot more resistance as they move through the water. So now we're going to take a look at butterfly. It's going to be a similar dynamic as in breaststroke. So the pull here, you can see that arch. That allows you to see all that space in the armpit. She's going to squeeze that back into her body, and that's going to give her a lot of pull. And by coming up a little bit, that's going to get her more leverage on the water, and she's obviously going to have to take a breath too. And so you can see that the wave is starting to go up here. And now by driving back down, she's getting back into position. And then by kicking the legs at the same time, that's going to pop her hips right up into the surface. And so the wave goes up during the breath, and then it comes back down. By timing the kicks with that, it's going to make it a lot more effective. The wave is going to travel a lot better, and by doing it at the right time, the effect is magnified. And so there's going to be some sort of wave action when she comes back down after the breath, and there's going to be some sort of wave action when she kicks. But if she does both at the same time, the effect is magnified. And so this is a 100-meter race. Look, hips right up at the surface, and she's probably not having to do much to make that happen in terms of adjusting her hips. It's happening as a natural consequence of the kick and the drive through in the front of the stroke. And so the press here in the front of the stroke, that also helps get the hips up. And so the arm recovery, the press in the front of the stroke, and then the kick timing is all helping her get back in line and taking advantage of the undulation that's coming from returning from the breath. And she's adding to that momentum by further pressing the chest and kicking the hips. And then that's going to make the effect of the wave even more significant. And because managing alignment and butterfly, keeping the hips up is really difficult to do. Whenever you can use anything to add to that skill to make it a little bit easier, make it a little bit more effective, that's going to be really valuable. So this stroke doesn't have a breath, but the same dynamic happens. You can see leveraging up through the pull and then recovering the arms, and then the wave comes back down and she still drives forward, still recovers the arms aggressively and kicks the hips up. And so that wave allows her to get more out of each stroke in terms of propulsion, and it also allows her to minimize the resistance that she creates by getting back into alignment with each stroke. And this is an example of ultimately why timing is so important. It allows swimmers to get more out of each pull, and it allows them to minimize the resistance that they create. So we'll watch another non-breathing stroke here, and she still comes up. And just try to imagine if she had tried to stay really flat, she's not going to get the same amount of power into the water, the same amount of force into the water. And that's why that undulation, even if it's not as much with the breath, it's still going to be important so that she can create leverage. And likewise, she's not coming up out of the water as much during the arm recovery because she's not breathing, but the same action needs to happen to get the hips back up in a position so that, again, she can create more leverage in the water by coming up. If the hips were never up, she wouldn't be able to come up with the pull. And so that simple up and down motion is going to be really important for, one, allowing for more propulsion with the upper body, and two, allowing for better alignment with the lower body and the hips. More propulsion, less resistance, that means more speed, and that's what we're ultimately looking for, and that's why great timing is so important. So another key aspect of the undulation to limb timing in butterfly is the recovery of the arms. So because the chest has lifted to start that upwards undulation, that upwards rotation, the shoulders are going to be up out of the water, which is going to allow for a fluid and effortless arm recovery. Most humans do not have the ability to pull their arms behind their body and then move them forward. And so if swimmers were flat on the surface, they either are going to have to drag their arms through the water, or they're going to have to possess some pretty impressive mobility. And even in that case, they're going to have to then drag the arms over the surface. And so by lifting the chest, starting that undulation, it makes it a lot easier to recover the arms. And then the momentum of the body can come back down from that, and the undulation can pass through the body, and that can get the hips up back to the surface to get back in line, having lost a little bit of alignment, to lift the chest, to breathe, and recover the arms. So a key aspect of undulation and limb timing is, again, the recovery of the arms. If swimmers are a little bit early or a little bit late, it's going to be a lot harder to recover the arms over the surface, and it's going to take a lot more effort to do that. And with butterfly, the more effort you spend on the recovery, the sooner people are going to get tired, and that's going to really slow them down. The undulation can be really effective for helping the arms recover, and when that happens effectively and when it happens efficiently, it's going to help swimmers swim a lot faster. So we'll take a look at the same thing with an athlete swimming the 200. And this typically you see a little bit more undulation, but the same basic principles apply. So pressing the chest, hips come up with that kick after the arm recovery, and then arching the back, lifting to come up for the stroke. It's the same basic thing. Timing with the press in the chest, the undulation, go down with the front, come up with the front, and then again, go down with the front, and then again, come up with the front. So it allows for more propulsion right here, and it allows for better alignment right there. And again, more speed is going to come from more propulsion and less resistance, and that's why the timing of the undulation is so important, because it allows swimmers to accomplish both without sacrificing either. Hopefully that was helpful to see these key skills. Once you can see them, then you can start to help swimmers change them. Best of luck with doing so, and as always, keep it simple.